Hey guys, this is Shelby with the Rogers Public Library. So this week for Full Steam Ahead, I want to talk to you about light bulbs, right? So before light bulbs, right, use electricity, the only real way to get like an artificial source of light was fire, right? So either in the form of a candle, which this is a light bulb that looks like a candle, right? Or a lamp, right, which is full of oil or kerosene and stuff like that, right? So the problem with using fire to get light is that it's really energy inefficient, right? It generates a lot of heat compared to the amount of light, and you have to use a lot of fuel. And also, fire is smelly and gross, right? If you burn a fire in an enclosed room, like inside somewhere, you're going to get a lot of smoke and soot and ash all over the place. And there's also fire risk, right? Because the fire might get out of control, and then your house catches on fire, or the city catches on fire, or right. So there's an inherent risk to that, right? And light bulbs, in contrast, are a lot safer, right? So early light bulbs, there's still a little bit of fire risk, right? Because they produce a lot of heat, right? These are called incandescent bulbs. I don't have any incandescent bulbs for you guys here today. I think there's one in here, if you can see it. Right, incandescent just means glowing, right? So they work on two general principles. The first is that if you heat something up hot enough, it's going to start glowing, right? That's kind of the basis of fire, right? And the other thing is that when you run an electric current through a wire, not all the electricity makes it, right? Some is lost due to resistance, and it turns into heat energy, right? So if you run a current through something and heat it up, and if it gets hot enough, it'll start glowing and you'll get light. So to do this effectively, you can't just hook up a battery to a wire. You need a material that can withstand like really hot heat. So early light bulbs used carbon, kind of similar to charcoal, as a filament, and then later on you get tungsten, which is a type of metal that has one of the highest melting points of all the metals, right? And then you get the glass container that the filament goes in, and that is to make sure that the filament doesn't catch on fire, right? Because it's so hot, there's the chance for it to spontaneously combust if it's in the presence of oxygen, right? So the bulb is an environment where that chemical reaction can't happen, right? So like fire, though, incandescent bulbs aren't super efficient because they produce a lot of heat. You have to produce a lot of heat to get the glowing effect. So there's some new types of bulb. One that you might be familiar with is a fluorescent bulb, right? And so what a fluorescent bulb is it's full of gas, specifically something called mercury vapor, right? So mercury is a toxic metal. Unlike tungsten, has a really low melting point. It's actually a liquid at room temperature, and a liquid at far below room temperature, right? But when you pass an electric current through mercury vapor, instead of getting really hot like an incandescent bulb does, it starts glowing a nice blue color, and then there's a white coating on the inside of the bulb that turns the blue light into white light. You've probably seen really long fluorescent bulbs before, right? Those are the ones that are in the ceilings in a lot of buildings, and in the ceiling here at the library. And then there's the curly ones that go into light bulb sockets in your house, right? And that work a little bit like that. They work similar to incandescent bulbs and like LEDs, which are these guys, right? So this is an LED flashlight, right? You can kind of see maybe there's these little individual things in there. Those are called diodes, right? So LED stands for light emitting diode. This is an individual diode. So unlike fluorescent bulbs that are filled with a gas, LEDs are solid, right? So it's solid state lighting. And because of that, they can be a lot smaller, right? So this is a really tiny LED, about the width of my fingernail, about my pinky right here, that produces a lot of light just by itself, right? So LEDs are semiconductors, and what that means is that they're just okay at conducting electricity. And in particular, these guys are only good at conducting electricity in one direction. So if I put my battery like this, it glows, but if I flip it over, it doesn't do anything, right? It only conducts in one direction. Yeah. So LEDs were invented in the 1960s or 70s, right? But specifically red LEDs, right? Because the actual color that it glows depends on the specific type of matter that's in there. But you can't use red LEDs for a lot of things, right? You need good old fashioned white LEDs. And those weren't invented until way later, like in the 90s, right? Specifically, well, first what happened is blue LEDs are invented, right? And so blue LEDs, like the gas inside of fluorescent bulbs, can be used to can be used with a fluorescent coating of white phosphor to produce white light, or you can also mix blue with other colors. If you mix blue and green and red light together, it makes white light. Yeah. So LEDs are way more energy efficient than incandescent bulbs, as well as fluorescent bulbs, right? And they only produce a really tiny amount of heat. It can the amount of heat can be substantial if you have like a bunch of LEDs together, but just individually, right? This isn't hot at all, right? It's just about room temperature, maybe a little bit warmer compared to the bulb in this thing that gets really hot. Yeah. So, but this week we're gonna have activity kits for you guys to pick up with some LEDs and some batteries, and then you can see how they work. And then I guess the only other thing I have to do with this guy is show you. They're really sensitive, right? So LEDs, if you put too big of a current through them, they break, right? So I can do this, right? This is a 3-volt battery, and it produces just enough electricity to get this guy to work. If I do this, let's see. Woo. I don't know if you heard that. There was a pop and a sizzle, right? So you have to be kind of careful with how you use these, what power source you use these, right? 3 volts are just perfect. A 9-volt battery like this is going to fry it. I mean, you shouldn't even think about using wall sockets, right? Because that's really dangerous. Okay. So yeah, that's what we have for you guys this week. And this is, of course, the last full steam ahead for the fall, right? So I'll see you guys back in January. We're learning some new cool science stuff.